Hello, J.E. Krieger, author of the books of 9 and 10 Penance, and I'm back again to read from my novel, The Magic Paintbrush, the first book in the series, about the boy trapped in the painting. And tonight I'm at a different park now. Thought this would be fun, change of pace. The cicadas are still out, but that's all right. Okay, so tonight we're reading from Ethan Bourdon's whole part in this story. We are on The Boy Blue, and we were reading from the night before The Desperate Man. So Botticelli, the villain, last night showed up. This is before he met Fragonard. Botticelli showed up at Ethan Bourdon's place and started selling his paintings, which Bourdon's father fell in love with his paintings. And at the end of the chapter, Ethan Bourdon was on the way to a party of pomp and circumstance, and he was dressed like a fancy lad in all blue. So I'll get right into it. The book is still available on Amazon for $2.99 for Kindle. I think it's like $16 if you want to order the book. All right, so I'll get right into it. The Boy Blue. And this is Ethan Bourdon's part. He's telling his story now. On my way into the party, I ran into my old friend Mays, whom I hadn't seen in years. He told me every royal painter from across the land was invited. They would be presenting their grandest works of art as a surprise to pay tribute to my father's talents, a skill envied by all artists of the day. I was somewhat relieved Botticelli would not be attending. His presence surely would have brought on much embarrassment for my father and me. Sure enough, when I entered the ballroom, some of the most exquisite painters had already arrived. Greuze, Lawrence, Boucher, Perrone, and Watteau, to name a few. Oh, and Reynolds was there as well. I was a bit surprised to see him, what with Gainsborough's presence, across the hall. The two had a long-standing rivalry, but over matters that are none of my concern or yours. Well, Gainsborough painted The Boy Blue, and Reynolds painted Pinky Girl, so there was no rival, but the two paintings sat across from each other for years at some art gallery. So I'll continue on. What a wondrous event, and even more wondrous still, I heard the most delightful little melody playing in the backdrop. The king hired Metsu, truly the finest musician ever heard by someone with 2 ears and a desire to listen. The king's daughter, Eleanor Siddell, she was swaying to this waltzing anthem of wealth and taste all by her lonesome self. I'll never forget what she wore, though it was tailored in the wrong size. It was the most ravenous yellow buttercup evening gown, with all the frills and frolics you could think of. She made a quick turn. We locked eyes, and then she went the other way. That's when I knew this was my chance to see if she cared to dance. I made my way toward her, navigating through a sea of lace and ribbon. But before I even had my chance, she vanished into a cloud of satin and silk, embroidery. The momentum of the music picked up, and so this innocent little game of cat and mouse was on. After the music died down, I found her out on the balcony. She was with her 2 best friends, Kiki and Dora Maar. I asked if she had a moment to spare. I promised I wouldn't bother her the rest of the evening. Where was I? Hold on. Her 2 friends quickly walked off, laughing at who knows what, perhaps the gossip of the day. Now that the 2 of us were alone, I got down on a knee and removed a letter from within my pocket, speaking words of love flowing from the heart that I'd never dared to utter to her before. When I'm with you, I feel like we're climbing a mountain, and when we reach the top, day turns into night. Oh, there's people at this park. and the stars and moon come out, only to reveal your beautiful, radiant soul. When the sun rises and dawn breaks, the day becomes brighter with each smile, each look that you give me. You are my young love, my new love, my old love, my soulmate, etc., etc., etc. In reality, I was never that good at expressing how I truly felt with a pen. I bought the poem from a man by the name of Rosetta, and Rosetta was actually Eleanor Siddell's lifelong love. Anyways, he was well known as a brazen man of song and lyric who knew how to speak directly from the heart. I was sure his words would surrender her to my arms without hesitation. To my surprise, after professing my true intentions, she ran back into the party without saying a single word in response to my linguistic bravado. Any man would have given up hope, but I kept hope alive just in case there was that chance. I followed after in this amorous pursuit of love, but she was nowhere in sight, not even from a sparrow's hidden view. I checked by Metsu's orchestra, hoping she was waiting there to take my hand in a waltz around the room, but she wasn't there either. I wondered if this wasn't all but a mere requiem of my lustful desires, until I heard a voice trying to sequester silence over the crowd. The music stopped abruptly. Everyone turned their heads and looked down the center aisle as the king was about to speak. I was concerned that I may have come on a bit strong with his daughter, but to my unexpected joy, he announced our marriage. I guess our little talk on the balcony was misunderstood as a proposal of love ever after. Eleanor was blushing red with excitement, the way her eyes marveled brightly under the lights as if she was about to faint. Let me know I'd found true love. This was turning out to be a grand event for the Bourdons. Love was in the air, the music, the mood, the people. I couldn't have been happier, and neither could my father. I was not only heir to the position of royal painter, but now I was heir to the throne as well, or so one would assume. The king then made another surprise announcement. He left the task of judging the works of art on display to my father and me, the winner receiving the position of heir to my father's seat at the king's table. And as an added bonus, a dance with Eleanor is the last dance she would ever have with another man before taking my hand. Now I really had to pick wisely, for whomever won this prize would get a chance to dance with the love of my life. My father started the competition off by weeding out the weak, separating the fine art from the rubbish. After inspecting their work, discussing the composition, palette, and overall subject matter, he left me with a menage a trois between only the finest standing in the room. Lawrence, Gainsborough, and Mays were all that was left. What a worthy group of masters to choose from. You could hear a pin drop in the crowd as I carefully passed judgment on their work. The first piece I reviewed was by Gainsborough. He already had a standing with the royal line. His painting of the boy blue, however, displayed far too much wealth and old money. One should be mindful when choosing symbols of their stature, or it could come back to haunt you. So I moved on to the next piece to see what sort of character it reflected in my own. Mays brought with a humbling piece called The Idle Servant. It was a depiction of two women cleaning up in the kitchen after a dinner party. One of them had fallen asleep. The other, an older woman, was standing over her, glaring in disapproval. It was a wonderful gesture towards a king seeking the approval of those less fortunate in our kingdom. I carefully considered announcing him as the winner, but I still had one more piece to review. The last painting, Pinky Girl by Lawrence, garnered some favorable attention from the crowd. It was an affectionate piece that truly celebrated the mood of the evening. The innocence of this beautiful young girl depicted on the canvas, holding her hand near her heart submissively to the will of the taker. She had an unbreakable gaze peering into the eyes of her future lover, whomever that may be. But before I could even begin toiling over these masterpieces, Eleanor said she'd already made up her mind. She fancied Lawrence's work over the other two, so I announced him as the winner. The crowd applauded pleasingly with my decision. The king then gave the dance with his daughter to Lawrence for appeasing her taste and my eye. He was the last one I wanted to dance with her, but of course, if only you knew the king like I did. Well, I couldn't begin to question his word once it had been spoken. That would just be silly. Finally, it was my turn to unveil the gift I brought for Eleanor. My father proclaimed it really wasn't necessary. I insisted he allow me to display my love for Eleanor before the world. I removed the drape, disguising this masterpiece in the making, and revealed a work of art simply titled The Lovers. And by the way, Ethan Bourdon, in real life, Paris Bourdon, painted a painting called The Lovers, which would later be covered by Cubist masters. Anyways, here we go. Everyone burst out in barbaric laughter. My father hid his eyes in shame. They said it was just a bunch of flat tonal shapes and it wasn't actually art. What do they know? I could tell Eleanor was rather upset with the crowd. She quickly covered the painting and demanded we carry on with the festivities. The king ordered the crowd silent so Metsu could begin a performance of his called the music lesson. While Eleanor and Lawrence were waltzing playfully to a lover's serenade, I grew dreadfully tired of the party. There's only so much pomp and circumstance one can put up with in an evening. So I decided to head to the Galleria. Oh shoot, hold on, and see what Botticelli was up to. To be honest, after spending all that time with him, I suppose he was finally starting to grow on me, the way unwanted flies grow on a green apple. I found him in the back room blending a hue together. He was finishing up the final touches on another portrait, one of many he'd been painting lately. It had been an obsession with him. I didn't know why he even bothered. It was a waste of time and talent if you asked me. Most artists usually only painted a portrait when someone had commissioned them to do so. After he applied the veneer over the lips of some poor unlucky fellow who had his brow ridge painted a little too high, he put his brush down and asked why I wasn't still at the party. Oh, I don't remember exactly what it was I said to him. I gave him some excuse. He asked if I cared to go for a walk. I thought it was a splendid idea and suggested we go for a stroll through Rubens' garden, or perhaps sit on a bench in Hobbema Park for a while and feed the ducks. They just put in this new pond, larger than the last one, though I suppose not as elegant. He didn't seem all that enthusiastic about my ideas. There was a place on the other side of town where many of his artistic friends frequented. He said he had some business affairs to take care of there. After that, we could go wherever I pleased. I assumed all the artists in the kingdom were at the party, or at the ball celebrating my father's birthday. I guess not everyone could attend. Against my better judgment, I took him up on his offer, and so we went for a walk there instead. I met quite a few interesting, yet awkwardly displaced people on my walk, many of them impoverished, with a tale of woe to tell. It was sad, really. They never found a way to pull themselves up from the situation they put themselves in. We met this one fellow, Paul Cézanne was his name. I stopped and talked to him for a while. He was a quarry worker, I could tell. His hands truly showed their age. He didn't seem like the type who cared much for what stature one held or how one presented themselves. By the way, Paul Cézanne was attributed with, I think, the invention of modern Cubism. I remember meeting another man by the name of Marcel Duchamp. He was playing a game of chess. To serve the mind rather than the eye is what he said to himself over and over again. The poor soul seemed so disheveled and beaten down by his personal atrocities. I had to turn the cheek and look away. This one man was sitting alone in an alleyway, plucking the strings of a violin under candlelight. He played the saddest tune I ever heard. Botticelli said his name was Georges Barak, an unappreciated musician who lost his job a few months back due to a decree signed by the king. I didn't want to get political, I told him, and so we continued to roam the streets. We turned down the next corner and there were people dancing and having a good time. The music was delightfully charming, more so than a boring old waltz. It had an upbeat tempo, savage and primal, echoing the rhythm of eternity. The bass sounded like a bottled-up baboon beating its chest in aggression. The trombone wailed like an elephant's trunk, and the guitar fought with the tenacity of a raging bull. In the center of this cabaret was a daring woman in a lovely tattered blue dress. She wasn't wearing any shoes, but that didn't seem to stop her from hopping around the crowd, pulling a suitor out she fancied with the glint of her eyes. Oh, they were majestic, beautifully lined in dark blue and satin. I wanted to join in on the fun, but I didn't think a girl like her would be interested in someone like me. Then, as she made her next turn, she grabbed onto my hand and yanked me out in the middle. I didn't have a clue as to what I was doing. I just followed her step and she did the rest. When the music changed tempo, we took a rest on a bench away from the crowd. She rested her hand on my shoulder and introduced herself as Tintoretta, the little dyer girl, which is actually what that means in Italian. I have to say, I was quite smitten, but unfortunately I'd just been engaged to the king's daughter. I didn't think Eleanor would approve. She said not to worry, for she'd met men like me before, though I don't believe I'd ever met a woman like her. The music picked up again, and so she continued to frolic for their amusement, while I wandered down the street to go find Botticelli at that pub. There wasn't a sign above the door, but I could hear people on the inside holler like feral bovine creatures. I pinched my nose and stepped into a wild party of drunken ne'er-do-wells. It stank of a rooster's den. Botticelli was at a table playing a gambling game with cups. I think that was the business affairs he claimed he had to attend to so urgently. It seemed he had a knack for this game, or rather a trick up his sleeve that allowed him to do so well. I sat down at the bar. I didn't want to lose all my money in such a frivolous way. There were these two gentlemen sat down on either side of me and proposed quite an interesting question with a hiccup and a burp. "Excuse me, young lad, you seem like an intellectual type with your feathery blue ensemble. My friend Chagall and I were discussing something. Perhaps you could enlighten us." I replied, "I don't know if I can, but I'll certainly try my best." The man stuck his finger in the air and said, "Tell me, is art a dream shared by all, or is it only something for those who wish to see it?" His friend interrupted before I even had a chance to reply. No, you misunderstood me to begin with, Matisse. I believe what my friend is trying to say. There's always art present, but not all can admire nor appreciate the beauty in a flower. Wouldn't you agree to this quandary?" "What is there to agree on, Chagall? It is a question, not a statement. Let the man answer." I didn't think the two of them would stop arguing, so I decided to propose a thought-provoking statement of my own to add to the conversation. Should art only be confined to the canvas, or can it be defined by shapes rather than the absolute boundaries we conceive? "Why not? Good answer, sir. Let's toast to it. So you propose that the dream is shared by all, but rather not defined by one's definition." "No, wrong again. What the lad was trying to say is defined by one's question. Isn't that so?" Oh, I'd never had such an enlightening conversation with a fellow artist before. All the artists at the party wanted to talk about were who commissioned their last work and what dowry they received. There was little talk of pushing the boundaries of what art really is or could be. I found myself immersed in their world, though I'd never been to this side of town. I was about to propose another thought-provoking question when Botticelli was thrown right into the middle of our conversation. The bartender told him to take it out back. He wasn't going to put up with any more roughhousing in his establishment. They picked Botticelli up and threw him out the back door into the alleyway. My new friends told me not to bother. He'd been thrown out that back door plenty and always managed to come out ahead. I'm sorry, it's kind of maybe not the best park I should have gone to. All right, where was I? Come out ahead. I just couldn't sit there while he was being accosted, so I went to go see what all the fuss was about. When I opened the back door, one of the men rolled up his sleeve, revealing a tattoo of a dragon. It had a tail that spiraled around his arm almost endlessly in a hypnotic whirl. Botticelli didn't hesitate. He pulled out his brush and palette and painted the dragon off his forearm. He then sent it chasing after him for what was once a mere thoughtless doodle. I was in complete awe by this unbelievable feat. After those ruffians were out of sight, he withdrew the dragon and wrapped it around his own arm to be used upon our kingdom at a later time. We left the alleyway and continued wandering the streets like a couple of jesters at the king's ball. I remember we walked by Baroni's tailor shop, a place that sold higher-end fabrics. I suggested with his winnings he visit there in the morning and turn his rags in for something more suited to the likings of a king in his royal court. He looked at me with an uneasiness of disapproval. I told him to cheer up and that tomorrow, once he acquired his new attire, he just might feel better about himself. He thought perhaps I was right, and then he threw a rock in the window and started doing some late-night shopping. I waited for him outside, and when he returned, he was wearing some fine black attire and a long and billowy hat that matched that crooked smile of his. Botticelli and I then walked back to the Galleria. I helped him lay down on the flowers in our backyard. He asked that I sit with him for a while and gaze upon the stars. I thought that was a rather silly idea, lying about in the dirt while we waste our time staring up at the sky. I decided to go inside and take a nap in the Galleria like a civilized human being. He kept rambling on. He even asked about my dreams in life. What an absurd question, and he had many of them. I'm an artist, not one of those intellectual idealist types who lives their life idly from one moment to the next. One can't hope all their problems will be solved simply by wishing for them in their dreams. He then offered to paint my portrait as a token of our friendship. I explained I already had enough painted by my father hanging on the walls of the king's castle, and I didn't need any more. It's a good thing I declined his offer. I might be telling you this story from within the confines of a canvas. In life, sometimes you must ignore the persistence of the lonely, so that's what I did about it. By the time I had my hand on the handle, I think he got the picture. Okay, that's the end of that chapter, and tomorrow night we'll be reading Portrait of an Artisan, which, okay, I know who painted that painting. That was Picasso, and also El Greco did a version of that, and then there was another artist. It's Portrait of an Artisan. I think it's from the 15th century originally, but many artists throughout history have done a version of that painting, but I always liked the balance between the Cubist version and the original version, which El Greco, and we'll read more about that in the next chapter, but El Greco was in Picasso's mind and many other Cubist painters' mind, one of the first, probably the first Cubist painter, or I guess you just have to see his work, and they did greatly admire it, and I do too. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the chapter for tonight. I will continue tomorrow, probably not at this park, because it was just a little too busy and a little too rowdy, and there's no lights on, really. So, yeah, unfortunately. But, well, I hope you enjoyed the story so far. I'll be back tomorrow night, probably about the same time, maybe a little later, and hopefully I can find a new location to read from. But you can always check out the rest of the chapters on my channel under the playlist section. I'm gonna sit down on these steps. Under the playlist section, and listen along to the whole book. And if you like, guys, if you really like what I'm reading, you like the story, maybe leave me a review or go check out the Kindle version. That'd be awesome. But I suppose that will conclude the story for tonight. You can't really see it, of the Magic Paintbrush. It's been fun reading this story to you guys. I'll see you tomorrow night.